Greetings and salutations, and thank you for clicking on the video. I do appreciate it. We are going to be looking at Ubuntu 17.10 Artful Aardvark. We are approaching the final beta release, which is coming up here in just a few days. And I have been doing videos kind of looking at the progress of Ubuntu 17.10. And this time around, we're doing it from hardware. This is not running in a virtual machine on top of something else. I actually installed it this morning because it seems to have gotten to a place where it is stable enough to do that. It went really well. I did run into a few little snags, which I will talk about as the video progresses. Now, usually when I start my videos, you don't see this lovely little application running. This little application is Simple Screen Recorder, and Simple Screen Recorder is what I use to do these videos. It is just super fast and easy, and I don't have to think about it, and I can just sit down and start recording. It's one of my very favorite applications for Linux, and the fellow who developed this is Martin Barrett, and for the longest time it was not available in the Ubuntu repositories. You would have to hook up his PPA to install it on Ubuntu. Well, guess what? It is now in the repositories, and it took a while, but yay, it's there. So congratulations on that, Martin. It's only been in about, I'd say 3 or 4 other distributions in their repositories for a long time, and it took a while to get it into Ubuntu. But that makes my life a lot easier because I don't have to manage that there PPA. And yes, it is running on hardware, and right now it's taking up quite a bit of memory because I got a browser open on another desktop, and just wanted to point out here that when this installed, it created its own little swap file instead of a swap partition. We've talked about that in past videos, and it chose 2 gigabytes for that, and everything worked out just fine. So let's jump up here real quick and take a look at the release notes, and also I want to take a look at the dates for its release. So we're looking at the OMG Ubuntu page right here, and they are saying that it's going to be coming out October the 19th, 2017. That will be the final release day, and we're just about to head into the final beta, which will be coming up on September the 28th. So I'm glad I'm doing this video now. Let's talk about the release notes here. They have finally appeared on the Ubuntu wiki, and we can go through them and see what the official poop is on Ubuntu 17.10. Before I get into talking about this, the reason why this is important and the reason why I am paying so much attention to it is because this is the first Ubuntu that is shipping with the GNOME desktop by default since 2010. Unity has gone away. So this is what you're going to get. And you can still install Unity. I was informed. I was under the impression that the Unity desktop had gone completely away, but I was corrected by Alan Pope from Canonical that no, it was actually still available, and you can just install it from the repository. So I guess they are going to be supporting Unity in some way, shape, or form up until, what would it be, 2021, which is when support runs out for Ubuntu 16.04. The other reason why this is an important distribution is because it leads to 18.04, which is going to be the next Ubuntu long-term support release. And a lot of people who use it on the desktop, that's what they use. So what you see now is really going to tell you what's going to be in the 18.04 release coming up. So let's see what they have to say here. Get Ubuntu 17.10. You could come to this page and do it, or you could also do a search for Ubuntu Daily Builds, and you can check it out. Let me warn you right now, at this stage, it doesn't run extremely well in a virtual machine. It will install with the latest image and appear to be running all right, and then when you update and reboot, it doesn't seem to work. But what you have to do to fix that is open up a terminal, or actually a TTY in your virtual machine because the desktop won't load, and then manually install the drivers for VirtualBox from the little CD that you pop in there, the virtual CD. So if you don't know what I'm talking about because you don't use VirtualBox, don't worry about it. It's just for those out there who would like to give it a try. So they have some information here on updating, and really the most important thing that they say in here is that the Ubuntu GNOME release has been discontinued. So if you're currently using Ubuntu GNOME of any flavor and you wanted to upgrade to 17.04 or even 18.04 coming up, if you're using Ubuntu GNOME long-term support version, it's just going to put you on regular Ubuntu. If you do not like the canonical modified GNOME desktop, then you can install GNOME Session and a few other bits and pieces, and you can have a more traditional GNOME experience if that's what you're used to. Updated packages include now kernel 4.13. And let's just talk about some of the features here. We didn't get too deep into this in the last few videos I've done, so if you're just finding this and you're wondering what's going on, probably be a good time to kind of go through all this stuff and talk a bit about it. The Ubuntu desktop now runs GNOME instead of Unity. Well, we've already covered that. The default display server is going to be Wayland if your system can handle it. Mine obviously can't, because I am not running Wayland and everything works the way it's supposed to. I have heard lots of people say that Wayland is incompatible with some of the applications, that you might run into some problems with things. Everything seems to work fine for me, including X forwarding, which I tested out before I did this video. That's something that I use with SSH to maintain all the computers on my network, and that was a big question mark that was hanging over Wayland. Was that going to work? Well, I think I'm running on X because everything seems to work just fine. The settings app has been changed around a little bit. I need to talk more about that in a few minutes. I've got some notes on that because there's some problems there that you guys need to be aware of. We now have an application called Logs, so we could look at the system TD journal. The on-screen keyboard has been switched to Caribou instead of Onboard, and that is a GNOME Core application. Simple Scan has a new workflow and design and is now also Core GNOME, so that's nice. The calendar now supports recurring events. LibreOffice has been updated to 5.4. We are on the very latest GNOME desktop, which is 3.26, which rarely ever happens in Ubuntu. If you've used Ubuntu GNOME over the years, and I have off and on, you know that they're usually pretty far behind. But right now we're on the cutting edge here, which is unusual. The buttons have been moved to the right. Some people really like that. There we go. The Ubuntu GNOME release has been discontinued, and then you'll be switched to GNOME, and then it talks about how you can install some pieces of the GNOME experience to have a GNOME desktop that's more GNOME-like. I haven't done any of that, and we'll talk more about that in just a few moments. And then they talk some more about the Ubuntu server. So we're about done with that part of the deal there, and we can actually start looking around and take a peek. But I really hadn't gone through that. Actually, they had not had those release notes posted the last time that I did one of these videos. Okay, so the first thing that I want to talk about is, I'll go ahead and just close the terminal. Yeah, I know, I could hit Q and then do it the other way. I want to talk about this settings thing that they got going on, because this has some issues. There's some things going on here that cause me heartache and pain. So if we come down here to the bottom, you can see now that we have default. Well, this is where they have hid the default applications, which is fine. That works okay. But this is also where users is. And this was a major pain. So when you first install Ubuntu, you are going to get the default user that you set up during the installation process. That was no problem, but I needed to create a second user. And let me show you what happens if I try and unlock this. I bet it'll work now that I'm recording a video. Nope, it did it. See how it just crashed? It just stops working. It doesn't actually log in. So to actually create an account for Cindy, what I did was I did it from the command line. So I used command line bash tools to create the user, set the password, and all that stuff, which of course works just fine, but there's a lot of people out there who wouldn't want to do that. They don't want to sit there and have to do all that stuff. You can change the dock, which I did, which all I mainly did was change the size here. You notice we have no control over fonts anywhere in here, at least that I can find. And these are all pretty much normal. They look kind of sort of like the GNOME settings when you click on them. So if you're used to a GNOME 3 desktop, then A lot of this is going to look really familiar. They've integrated some stuff in there. But to get complete control, you have to go to Tweaks. And I know that simple screen recorder keeps popping up because I haven't moved it to another desktop, but usually I try and skillfully hide that so it looks all slick and stuff like that. Okay, so there's some things here that don't work. For instance, like right here, this is set to display the home directory on the desktop. It don't do it. I was able to get rid of the trash can, and that was nice. And this is it shows files that are on the desktop, because this is actually a file. It's a link to a directory called work that has to be there for a few of my applications to actually work. So I put that in there. We go to extensions. You need to see that it appears that everything's off, and we only have 2 extensions listed. And so when I first started looking at that, I was trying to figure out what was going on. Why do I see this? And that's because Ubuntu does not ship with the GNOME extensions installed. So if you want to use traditional GNOME 3 extensions, you have to first install the GNOME 3 extensions, which is like GNOME extension. Well, I'm trying to remember the name of the package now. It's GNOME extensions, and then if you have Google Chrome, then you have to have GNOME extensions Chrome installed. It's a couple of packages that you have to have. I searched for that in software, couldn't find it. We'll talk about that in a few minutes too, because I've heard some people who had some things to say about that as well. So anyway, if you want to change your fonts or whatever, you have to install this lovely thing. And this is the GNOME Tweak tool, which is now simply called Tweaks. And the name of the package is GNOME Tweak Tool. The package name hasn't changed, but the name of the application on the menu has. It's no longer Tweak Tool, it's just Tweaks. And so you have to have this to get to certain things. And certain things in here don't seem to work the way they should. So I didn't change it, and I did not install GNOME extensions, because really the only thing that there's a few extensions I like to use, but I'm not going to do that until it becomes a final release, if I should continue to use this, which it's just a temporary install at this point, so I don't think I will. So yeah, that was a couple of things to talk about there. Did I get them? Yep, I did. And let's see, what else is it? This is just what it looks like. I mean, I haven't made huge. Let's go to a clean desktop so we don't have to look at that every time I click on it. And it just pops me right back up there, doesn't it? Open a terminal. Okay. Now when I do this, it won't do that. Yeah, it will. Why won't you switch me to the desktop? That's kind of weird. I'm noticing some strange behavior right now while I'm making this video. You notice how it keeps wanting to... Okay, well, let's try this. I think that was something I did. Okay, go to this desktop. Okay, now it's doing what it should do. My fault, not the system. System's working fine, just got confused which desktop I was on. I forgot I had a browser open. So what was I going to show you? I was going to talk about software. This application is a GNOME application which has been modified by Ubuntu. I've had some people say that there's some interesting things going on in here, that they have the Snap Store set up, and that you have to create an account to get into that. I haven't even investigated that, nor probably will I, because the last time that I looked at Snap applications, they weren't quite ready for prime time. There's a lot of stuff going into the Snap archives right now, which is great, but I've also heard some people say they had problems, so I kind of stick to the regular, just the normal repositories. So here's everything that's installed on the computer. I was pleasantly surprised that I was able to find or get installed pretty much everything I needed. So as far as like installing VirtualBox, for instance, I went to the VirtualBox website, and then I got the one for 17.04, and it works. It's not a problem. All the dependencies are met, but they don't have one for 17.10 posted yet, of course, because that's a third-party proprietary software. So here's what that looks like. It renders GTK applications nicely, because this is like, not GTK, Qt applications. It renders them nicely. This is like Qt5 right here, so it looks good. And I didn't have to change the environment as I usually have to do with standard GNOME. Actually go in there and tell it to render Qt as GTK. So this is what is installed. And that's pretty much what's useful here to me, is just being able to get a quick installed list and being able to down and dirty remove things. And then if you go in here, we have other applications listed. You can just click on it and install it, but I don't use this stuff. What I usually do is install Synaptic Package Manager and use that. And somebody had also said in the feedback that I was getting that Synaptic will not work if you are running Wayland as your default display server. So I probably would not be running Wayland even if my hardware was compatible. It's probably not compatible because I'm running an NVIDIA video card, which I know is not quite Wayland ready yet. So this is the one that I use all the time, and it's a little bit more of an advanced installer. The other thing that I always install is GDebi, which is an application that lets you graphically install deb files that you would download. So if you go to, let's go in here and look at a deb file so I can show you what happens when you click on one. You go into downloads. It's a little confusing for me right now. So this is something that's already installed, so it should come up and tell me that it's installed. And it doesn't tell me that it is installed. It prompts me to install it yet again, so that's kind of interesting. What happens if I click on it? Because I installed this earlier and it installed. Okay. Guess maybe it just had to double check that it was installed. Anyway, right now as the desktop works, I can't get to GDebi. So if I would choose, let's see, software install is there. That's the one we just looked at. So if I choose to look for another application, well, GDebi is not listed, is it? gthumb is, and grsync and Google Chrome are there, but it doesn't even see that GDebi is in the system. However, I can open GDebi from the menu. So let's see if we can find that. Okay, so there's GDebi. And then I can open an application from here. And so let's go to Open. Let's go to Open, please. Thank you. Let's get into Downloads. Go to Packages. And then same package, we can just take a look here, and it should tell me that it's installed. And it's scanning, and it says, yeah, see, that's the way it's supposed to work. If the package is already installed, then it offers to remove it, but it doesn't work from the menu. Which leads me to another little application that's very useful to have around when you are working with the GNOME desktop, and that is called a la carte. Now, the name of the package is a la carte, but it's usually called Menu Editor. So let me see if I can find it in here. We'll just do a type and see if do a search and see if it shows up. All right. So this is actually a program called a la carte, which is a menu editor, and what this allows you to do is fix things like that. So GDebi works fine from the command line, which is ordinarily actually where I use it the most. It kind of a little wonky graphically, like I showed you, and right now I'd have to set up I think I'd have to set up a manual association for it or something. I don't know what I would need to do to get that working, but I don't use it that way anyway. I'm just letting you know in case you use GDebi on a regular basis that it's not quite working quite yet with the latest GNOME desktop. So that's basically it. The only major thing that I ran into was that users stuff not working. Everything else seems to be working quite well. And let's just real quick take a look at some speeds and feeds. So this is running in HTOP is running. Let me go ahead and head up here to this desktop and close Google Chrome, and then I go back down here, and it's cached, but usually when it boots up, it's actually not using as much memory as the regular GNOME desktop does. It's just a little bit less. It's like 700 megabytes or something like that just to run the desktop. It created a 2 gigabyte swap file. Ubuntu as of 17.04 does not use swap partitions anymore. It creates a swap file. Talked about that in past videos. So it seems to be running quite well. Let's see. Let's look at the kernel version that we are currently running and see if I can type that in without making huge mistakes. So we are on 413.0-11. That's what we're running for a kernel right now. Now the system that I'm running, let me just give you kind of a look at what I've done. so you know what it is. This drive that you see, SDA, that's just a little laptop drive that I have plugged in and installed Ubuntu on. The second drive there, the big terabyte drive, that is the home directory from my Linux Mint installation that I have running on this machine. So I'm good to run Ubuntu for a while. I can run this. I don't know how long I'm actually going to run it, but when I finally decide to go back to the long-term support Linux Mint version, all I got to do is swap a cable and boot it back up, and it works just fine because I just switch the hard drives, and I can make sure all the data is synced from the new drive to the old drive and that sort of stuff like that, and that should work. So that's what we're doing right now, and I don't know how long I'm going to run this. I mean, if it crashes hard, then I'll be switching back for sure, but I would like to kind of run it for a little while just to play with it, get used to it. I really don't plan on tinkering with the desktop and installing GNOME extensions and things like that until it becomes a complete release. So right now I'm keeping it pretty generic for Ubuntu. And this is kind of funny, guys. This little drive that I've got installed, it's like really full. So I've got like 61 gigabytes left on that drive because I went ahead and copied all my data over just to have it around to see what would happen. But that's definitely not going to stay like that. If I was going to move to Ubuntu from the Mint install, I would have to do something fun. What I could do is just grab another terabyte drive and then make just clone this drive over to that one and then make the partition bigger, and that would be fine. But I kind of like running two drives in the machine because of using the virtual machines. So I ain't got nothing more to say. We've rambled on for quite some time. Thank you for watching the video. I certainly do appreciate it. I did some updates to easylinux.com, so you might want to check that out. I also have been posting a lot of little opinion things on the Facebook page, so you might want to check that out as well. Also check out freedompenguin.com for lots of great stories about Linux from contributors such as myself. And for those of you who have been wondering where Matt Hartley is, I did hear from the man. He is alive. He's just fighting dinosaurs, and he should be back on the interwebs with his regular video appearances and things like that. So hope Matt gets out from under real soon, and I thank you for watching and love to hear your comments and feedback. So thank you very much. Talk to you guys again soon. Probably the next video that we do will be after the release day, unless something really major comes up. So that would be what, little less than little more than 3 weeks. There we go, for the next Ubuntu 17.10 report.